Dave Smith here. Okay, so what I'm going to talk about today is in-camera positives by the reversal process. Now what I mean by that is in a large format camera, loading the dark slide, that's the film holder, with photographic paper such as you would use in a darkroom under an enlarger. Exposing that, which would expose to a negative, but then processing it in to reverse that, to make a positive. Now, I've been interested in doing this because I have this project for the MFA to shoot trees, and I want to do that with the ultra large format camera, which is 12 by 20 inches. And 12 by 20 inch film is ruinously expensive. That would be something like 25 to 30 pounds a sheet, I believe, depending on precisely what you buy. So this is an interesting way of making that camera more cost effective to use. So I thought it would be interesting to talk through a little bit about what I've been doing and what my findings are and how things have gone. I have done some research online. I've used Joe Van Cleef, Matt Marash and Ethan Morris, I want to say, from Camera Dactyl. They all have YouTube channels that have done some work on this, and I've got various other bits of sources as well. My process is a little bit different to theirs, and I'll explain that as we go along. I will try to put the references for this in the video description so you can check those guys out as well, if this is something you're interested in doing. It doesn't have to be large format, by the way. If you've got a medium format camera or even a 35mm camera, you could just as easily cut down strips of darkroom paper and put them into those cameras, and I think Ethan does that with a Mamiya medium format camera at one stage. Well, Mamiya back uses his own Camera Dactyl cameras. Anyway, let's get into it. So the first step for me was to gather the chemicals, and I'm going to say something about the chemistry in a little while, and to try to fix on an exposure. Now, received wisdom is that you set your meter to ISO 3 because typically that's the lowest ISO value that your meter will go. I have this Minolta Flash Meter 5. I also have one of the new Revany spot meters. The spot meter will go down to ISO 1. This only goes down to ISO 3, and that's typical of meters. So I set it to ISO 3, and then I did a test at that, and I think this is +1. So this was F11 at 8 seconds. Now I'm saying more about that particular one. This was the first example that I produced, but I'll come back to that in just a moment. It was much too light. Now let's be clear about what's happening. So when you do your first exposure, your in-camera exposure, you are changing, you're activating silver halide sites so that they can be acted upon by the developer and turned into pure silver, and that's what gives you your image. But you bleach that away, and then what you're left with is what looks like a white sheet of paper, but there are unreacted silver halides left in that paper, and that's what your fixer would do, would get rid of those. But we don't do that. We bleach it so that the silver is removed, the silver image which is in negative, leaving behind the unreacted silver halides. You then expose that to light to fog that, which activates what's left behind, and then when you redevelop that, that's for your positive image. So if this is too light, that means that there's not enough silver halides left. You've overexposed. So you want to reduce the exposure to make this a bit darker. And so this is my second attempt, and this is one stop more exposed than that one. Sorry, I said just then that you want to reduce the exposure. You don't. You want to increase the exposure, so that there's more silver halide left behind. So this is one stop overexposed, and you see that's actually quite good. So let's hold on to those two. Now the problem I had, let's go to this one. This is also one stop overexposed, so essentially those two are the same thing, and they look pretty much the same. The problem I had with these was there's this pinkness to them, and that was difficult. So I did some research on that, and it seems to be that you get pink staining on your darkroom paper if there is oxidized developer present. Now I don't think that was the issue for me, and I'll show you why in a moment, but that's what happened to this. So the fix for that is sodium sulphate, which will dissolve away oxidized developer. So I refixed this in hypo sodium thiosulfate with some sodium bisulphate to dissolve away any developer, but that didn't work. All it did was to bleach the image, so that wasn't working, and I didn't really think it would work, because I also noticed this. This was a piece of paper that had been cut, and it had been actually exposed but not developed. I dispensed with this just because it didn't work. It wasn't the right exposure. But I just left it on the side, and over time it got this pink hue, and so that led me to think that it was to do with my second exposure. What I was doing was I would do the first develop into water to wash off the developer, excuse me, then into the bleach, rinse it, then into the clearing bath. Now once it's in the clearing bath, you can then re-expose. And what I was doing is taking the clearing bath out of the darkroom into the sunlight, and I reasoned that was giving me a gross overexposure, which is what you get here. But remember that there's relatively little of the silver halides left after the bleaching, so it's not as drastic as this, but it is ugly. So because I'd seen that, I thought, well, let's try again, but this time let's, instead of re-exposing under sunlight, let's just do it under room light. So when I had bleached, rinsed into the clearing bath, I then turned the room light on. Now the room light is just in the ceiling, it's like a 60-watt bulb or something in the ceiling, and I turned that on, and my sink is over by the wall, so it's a fair distance away. Now other people will say to you, Joe Van Cleef does his second exposure under his enlarger, about 16 inches away, so my light is a lot further away. I wasn't too worried about that, and this is the result that I got as a consequence of that. And this is +2, so this is ISO 3 plus 2 stops, and that's really a nice image. So that's what I've settled on. So let me talk a bit about how I went through this. So I exposed in the camera +2 stops over ISO 3. First developer. Now the first developer is just Ilford Multigrade paper developer, 1+9, and I developed for 2 minutes. Now I think this is resin coated paper, so I think 1 minute would be fine. But I want to develop to completion, so I just leave it for 2 minutes. Out of that, now I introduced an acetic stop bath, and it's just 2.5% acetic acid, which is white vinegar from your supermarket. If you get white vinegar from your supermarket, that's I think about 5 or 6%, so I just dilute it 50-50. And I use that as a stop bath. Now I did that to be sure that the developer was done, that there was no further development going on, there was no potential for carryover of developer or oxidized developer, any of that stuff. So I introduced that instead of a water rinse. 10 seconds in there, then into a rinse, just to quickly rinse that off, then into the bleach. Now the bleach I use, Joe Van Cleef talks about a citric acid bath and hydrogen peroxide bath. I did try those, but in one solution, and it didn't clear well at all. It didn't bleach well, so I have issues with hydrogen peroxide because it's basically a volatile substance. It naturally breaks down into oxygen and water, so it doesn't have a good shelf life even on its own. So the bleaching solution I use is a 2-part solution. It's a 2% solution of potassium permanganate. If you use this, then be aware that potassium permanganate stains everything. It's that pinky purpley crystal that you perhaps used in high school, but it's relatively easy to get hold of. So you make up a 2% solution of that, and you mix that 1-to-1 with something like, actually it's not a 2% solution, it's a 0.2% solution of potassium permanganate, and you mix that with, I want to say, something like a 3% solution of sodium bisulphate. Now sodium bisulphate is highly soluble, so it will completely dissociate, and it gives you a weak sulfuric acid. Now the literature on this will tell you that you mix this weak solution of potassium permanganate with a weak solution of sulfuric acid. Very hard to get sulfuric acid these days, so the sodium bisulphate is perfectly adequate, and when that's in solution, you've essentially got a weak sulfuric acid with some sodium ions floating around in there, and that's perfectly adequate. So that's my bleach. You mix those 1-to-1. Now when they're mixed, they have a pretty short shelf life. I did keep using it over about a week, and after a week it was pretty dormant, let's say. For these I mixed up a complete fresh set of chemicals because I wanted to make sure that there was nothing nothing else causing this pink staining. So that's my bleach. Then it goes into a clearing bath. Now the clearing bath is to clear the stain of the potassium permanganate, and if you do use potassium permanganate and you get stuff stained, then a wash with the clearing bath might well remove the stain. The clearing bath is sodium metabisulphate. Okay, sodium metabisulphate. That's NS. Ooh, I want to say Na2S2O5, and that almost immediately clears the stain from the permanganate. I leave it 20 seconds in that bath, then a rinse. The light is on now, so as soon as it goes into the clearing bath, the overhead light goes on. It's 20 seconds in the clearing bath, then a rinse, then back into the developer. And I just use the same developer as the first developer. It just goes back in at 1+9. Now, various people, Joe Van Cleef, for example, says it takes about 30 seconds to develop, but he's held his directly under his enlarger at 16 inches. My light is quite a lot further away and probably quite a lot weaker. So what I did is put it in the developer. The light is on, so I'm just developing by inspection, and we're developing to completion. And I'm looking for good black in this margin around the very edge here that was covered by the rails in the film holder. So mine took a lot longer than 30 seconds. I was probably more like 2 to 3 minutes before it was fully developed. And I think the reason for that is that it's still exposing under that light as it is also then developing. And I just leave it to go, and it worked, I would say, perfectly well. Really pleased with that result. So let me just run through the process again then. So I've written it out for myself so I don't forget anything. I've got 14 steps to my process. So it's expose your paper at ISO 3 plus 2 stops, develop to completion under a standard paper developer dilution. I used Ilford Multigrade developer. Other people use Dectol. Dectol is a Kodak developer, so if you're in the States, then that's probably easier for you to get. I do that for 2 minutes. It's probably okay for a minute, but you want to be sure to develop to completion, so I give it 2 minutes. Then it goes into a rinse. Then it goes into a 2.5% acetic acid stop bath for 10 seconds. I just made that stop bath up because I happen to have a jug of acetic acid lying around, just white vinegar at about 5%. So you could use a standard stop bath, it would be fine. Then into a rinse. Then it goes into the bleaching solution, which is that mixture 1-to-1 of those two chemicals that I mentioned. And that takes about 2 to 3 minutes. And I just bleach that by inspection. And you want to get everything gone. Now under your red light, and you're still under red light at this stage, it won't look, the paper won't look white because it's stained by the potassium permanganate. So you want it to be, it'll look a kind of pale grey, and you want it to be uniform. You don't want to see any blackness there. 2 or 3 minutes should be fine. Then I rinse it again. Then it goes into the clearing bath, and as it goes into the clearing bath, I turn the room light on. I leave it in the clearing bath for about 20 seconds. In truth be known, it's cleared in just a few seconds, but I'll leave it for 20 seconds. Then I rinse it. Then it goes back into the developer to develop to completion by inspection. It takes about 2 to 3 minutes. Then I put it back in the stop bath. Then I rinse it, and then I fix it in Ilford Rapid Fixer at 1+4. Now, the fix probably isn't necessary because by this stage, remember, you've exposed this paper twice. So probably all of the silver halides have gone. But I fix just to be sure. Then I rinse it, then I dry it. And presto, I get prints like this. And I'm really pleased with them. Let me go through the chemistry. I will put the chemistry, I'll put the process and the chemistry in the description below so that you've got that if you want it. The chemistry is, as I said, standard Ilford Multigrade paper developer 1+9, a 2.5% acetic stop bath, but any stop bath will be fine. A bleach in 2 parts. Part 1 is 2 grams per litre of potassium permanganate and 28 grams per litre of sodium bisulphate. Just before you're going to use them, you mix those 1-to-1. Now, I'm doing pretty small quantities at the moment, so I've kept that. But probably what I'll do is mix that fresh each time because the chemicals are not expensive. Clearing is sodium metabisulphate, Na2S2O5 at 30 grams per litre, and fix is the Ilford Rapid Fixer at 1+4. So that's it so far. Now my next step, what I'm going to do next, and you see that's continued to, this was quite kind of yellow cream when we started, right? But it's continuing to develop, to print out actually. Anyway, my next step is to try all of this again, but with RA4. Now RA4 is colour paper, it's for printing colour negatives. The chemistry is much easier, so with an RA4 sheet you develop in the Ilford Multigrade black and white developer, so you develop a black and white image in total darkness. That then goes into what's called a Bleach. It's a bleach fix combined for the RA4 process, and the room light goes on at that point, and you just see the image appear. Then you can rinse it and dry it. The chemistry is much more straightforward, but the exposure is more difficult, because remember that colour negatives have that orange mask, so that paper is expecting to see that colour of light passing through that orange mask, so you have to simulate that for a start, and then you have to, it's tungsten balanced because it's for enlargers, of course, so you then have to colour correct the daylight that you're shooting, unless you're shooting under tungsten light, of course, which I won't be. I'm going out into the field with all this. So I'm going to run some tests. I'm going to see if I can determine a suitable filter pack to simulate that orange, and then to daylight balance the paper, and I will come back to you and show you some results from that. And then ultimately my aim is to take this 12 by 20 camera out to the local deer park where the ancient trees live, and to make some portraits of the ancient trees in the Prince Bishop's deer park down here in Bishop Auckland. And I should end up with 12 by 20 inch prints, either in black and white or in colour, or probably both, and decide which I like best. Just one more thing to say, I think, about this stuff. This is multigrade paper. I've used gloss here, and I will probably continue to do that. I might try fibre-based paper, not decided yet, but my tests have been on this resin-coated stuff. Now it is multigrade, so that does mean that you can mess about with the contrast. It is inherently a contrasty process, okay, and I think you can kind of see that in the brickwork down here. Now I quite like that, and I quite like high contrast images, so I probably won't mess about with that. But you could use the Ilford Multigrade set that you've got with your enlarger, and I have a set downstairs. You could use that set of filters, and if you could reduce the contrast by using a 0 or a 00 filter in front of your lens. And at some stage I might mess about with that, but at the moment I'm really happy with how that image has come out. So that's what I'm going to do for now. Anyway, I hope all that is of some interest. If you do give this a go, drop me a line and let me know. Send me an image if you've taken some images. I'd be really keen to hear about your experience. And just, I don't know whether you can see the screen behind me here, but that's just been cycling through some images that I took in the Orkneys recently. I was up there photographing the Neolithic sites. There might be a video coming on that as well at some stage. Anyway, that's it for now. I hope that's been of some interest. Bye for now.